So I wanted to welcome everybody to the United Nations Association Marin County Chapter Event Series. This is for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals of 2030, in particular, Sustainable Development Goal number 4, Quality Education for All. I just wanted to begin with a couple of thank yous to the people who have put a lot of energy and effort into making this event happen. So Sasha and Zoe are two of our local Marin chapter board members who will be emceeing this event today. I'm just here to welcome you. I'm also part of the local board chapter. Bonnie Hunter is our membership chair, also on the board, and she has been in the background responding to emails and sending out emails and making phone calls and getting people to join the event today. So thank you so much, Bonnie. And then of course to other of our board members and friends and colleagues who have been helping to put the word out about this event. Thank you so much. And we have some other UNA chapter people here. Hi, everybody from outside of Marin County. Nice to see you. And is there anybody obvious I'm forgetting that we should for sure thank before we begin? You'll see that Sasha and Zoe have worked hard to put this presentation together today. So in particular, I want to thank you guys so much. Let's see. Oh, go ahead.
Could I welcome Frank Rettenberg? Hi, Frank, with the Marin World Affairs and all the wonderful events he organizes that if you join our chapter, you get to attend.
Great, thanks for that. Okay, so I will speak to you all at the very end to help close us up. And I am now happy to hand the MC-ship over to Zoe and Sasha. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Felicia. So hi, everyone. Welcome to our SDG number 4 event. So excited to be here. So just a little overview of the event. So Sasha and I will introduce ourselves, and then Sasha is going to present a little bit of information about SDG number 4, access to quality education, and she's going to cover the international and the local perspective. This is supposed to be a very interactive type event. Sasha has worked really hard, so you guys are engaged. So hopefully it should be really fun. A little bit more about the event in general. So SDG number 4, this is a part of an SDG series. So roughly about every other month, we're hosting events to raise awareness about different SDGs. So today happens to be SDG number 4. So lastly, my name is Zoe, and I am involved with the UNA Marin, and I am the secretary of the board. Now I'm going to hand it off to Sasha to introduce herself.
Thank you, Felicia and Zoe, for the wonderful introductions. So my name is Sasha, and I'm also on the UNA Marin board. I am kind of in advocacy in maybe tribal affiliation sector. So with that, we will try some interactive technology. It will be just a link and a click, and but if that is too much, we always have, you could just unmute yourself and speak to a question, or we could utilize the chat and we will read the chat. So to make sure your voice is heard. So thank you. And with that, Zoe, would you mind sharing the presentation? Beautiful, thank you. So SDG number 4, it is quality education. Next slide, please. Beautiful, thank you. I think, did you make a full screen, Zoe?
Yeah, sorry. I'm having issues with the presenting on pair. If you would give me 1 second. So sorry about that, guys.
That's totally wonderful. So in the meantime, I guess I do have some statistics that we could start with, that we will touch on later in the presentation about kind of how all the SDGs are included and kind of get at this really interconnectedness of the SDGs and what they get at, which is inequality and poverty. So globally, around 5.5 million more girls than boys of primary school were out of school in 2018. And 258 million children and youth were still out of school in 2018, which is nearly 1/5 of the global population in that age group. So I will touch upon some more positive and uplifting statistics, though I will point out how we still have a lot to work on. Okay, wonderful, Zoe. Awesome. Okay, so next slide, please. So what is SDG number 4? The goal is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education for all and promote lifelong learning and opportunities for all. And this is the little logo it has. Next slide. So SDG number 4 is split up into, as we see here, around, all these targets, 7 targets, and then there's A, B, C targets. And I picked 2 of them just to go over. This is just for the layout, so we know the broader scope of it. Next slide, please. So target number 4.5, eliminate all discrimination in education. So this can also include build and upgrade inclusive and safe schools. And yes, next slide. And target 4A is build and upgrade inclusive and safe schools. So I kind of included 2 just as we, so we could keep that in the back of our minds when we go through the international education research, and also the one that is national in the United States too, to be applicable. Okay, so this is one of our interactive first pieces. So this is Honorable Justice Murray Sinclair. He was the first Aboriginal judge appointed to the province in British Columbia. And so this is his quote: "Education is what got us here, and education is what we will get us out." So we will put a link in the chat, and it will take you to this site where you can anonymously answer this question. I will put it right here. And you do not have to log in into any email. It is just a click, and then it will ask you how are you doing today? You could just give that question. And this could be opened in a mobile app or on a computer. And then you will see a little green answer this question. We could take a couple minutes. And if we need a refresher on the picture, I'll repeat it again. It's education is what got us here, and education is what will get us out. So what does he mean by this, or what are your just first thoughts? What comes to mind? And please, if you're having trouble accessing the link or having problems, you could also just use the Zoom chat. You could private message me, or you could just unmute and respond.
Sasha, I don't know if it's for some other reason, but when I clicked on the link, it took me to the first slide of the presentation. I didn't see a little option to answer. So I don't know if that was just me.
Is anybody else having that? Christopher also has the same. Interesting.
Maybe we could just put our responses in the chat if you're not getting answers back yet.
Yeah. If we're not getting any answers, then please, yeah, put your answers in the chat.
What's the question? Oh, the thoughts after reading the quote?
Yes, just kind of first, if it brings up anything, or what do you think he means by this quote, or what does it mean to you? So we have a couple answers in the chat, right? We think he's right. Education is absolutely essential for everyone. That is absolute, yes, is needed. What does he mean by here? Right. Get us here. Is that a political state? Is that 2021? Is that very good question? We have another answer in the chat. Crucial nature of education, that is of quality. And we have another one. Education is essential and it has to be done right. So awesome. Thank you so much for your responses. We will touch upon all this going forward. So beautiful. Next slide, please. Beautiful. Okay. So this is just, I wanted to make a little distinction as we are sometimes confused with the United Nations. So the United Nations maintains international peace, protects human rights, delivers humanitarian aid, upholds international law, and promotes sustainable development. And we will be focusing on one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which was made in the Sustainable Development Department. And the UNA carries out the SDGs to raise awareness, right? So we are not a lawmaking body, we just follow. Okay, awesome. Oh, and I do want to present a couple more comments in the chat. So one says, like language to voice our presence. Education on that informed vernacular is the essence of inclusion. Therefore, all community health relates around that educational linguistic process. Wow. And then education is a reflection of the views of society, always evolving. Thank you all for your participation and your voices. We appreciate those. Okay, next slide, please. So, right, so the sustainable development goals. Education enables upward socioeconomic mobility and is a key to escaping poverty. Education helps reduce inequalities and reach gender equality. So this will be maybe covered as well in the next SDG event. However, I did want to preface how a lot of the SDGs are interconnected and help bolster each other. Okay, next slide. This is a happy quote, right? 91. So enrollment in primary education in developing countries has reached 91%. This is very astounding. We have come a long way. So it is necessary for us to recognize all the efforts of the UN and all of the bodies that I will now touch upon. Next slide. So it is partly because of UNESCO, UNICEF, that a lot of these studies and help and aid really increase the percentage that we saw in the previous slide. And right, and also the World Bank helps with research and other other kind of financial help for the SDG number 4. Okay, and past successes. So also to note how much we have come. Total enrollment rate in developing regions reached 91% in 2015. This is all right, pre-COVID. I will get to COVID later in the section and how that has impacted things. Dramatic increase in literacy rates, and many more girls are in school than ever before. Yes, however, still children from the poorest households are 4 times more likely to be out of school than those in the richest households. So we could kind of hold that disparity as well. And disparities between rural and urban areas also remain high. So this is something that's international, and also we could kind of ponder when we look about the local educational system that we have here. Next, okay. So figure 10, so this shows proportion of children and adolescents not achieving basically proficient levels in reading by SDG region. And so I want to just tie our attention to, right, and it is split between primary and lower secondary school. And it has regions like Western Asia and Northern Africa, Eastern Asia and Southeastern Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, etc. And I want to tie our attention to the highest bars, right? The highest percentage, which is children are in school but not learning, right? So why is this? So maybe that 91% statistic that we saw earlier, right? Maybe there's something deeper to that. Maybe there's another question of quality, and that is something that is really relevant as well in the United States, if we also are going to touch upon that. So, and we also see that in school not learning high levels across all regions, all SDG regions, and for both primary and lower secondary. So also just, there is a lack still, but next. So this is also, it is a good statistic. So this is showing the proportion of children, one second. Proportion of children and youth out of primary, lower and upper secondary school from the 2000s to 2018. And so this is good because it is showing a decrease, so a global decrease of children not being in school, which means more and more children are going to school, right? So at least in primary, lower, and upper secondary school. So this is, Zoe, would you mind just clicking this SDG tracker? We'll also post these slides in case somebody would like to learn more. But as we just, scroll down the site, we also just see the current statistics about, where global education is, and we see how it has increased. Okay, awesome. Thank you for that resource. Awesome. So this is a big one. So future promises. It is by the Office of Global Insight and Policy at the United Nations. And I'm just going to introduce the Office of Global Insight and Policy serves as UNICEF's internal think tank, investigating issues with implications for children, equipping the organization to move effectively, shape the global discourse, and preparing it for the future by scanning the horizons for frontier issues and ways of working. So one thing as I And this is the source as well. So it's very, very interesting. But some long-term goals was that it predicted that there will be a lot of tipping points in terms of climate change and globalization effects, so which would raise awareness in schools to solve this problem. And I have an example by one of an educational leader. Her name is Kat Kadung Dong, and this is what she says. While engaging high school students, a balance must be struck between communicating climate change and educating them on how it works, and scaring them and having their motivation be fear instead of the promise and hope that something can be done. A great opportunity is showing what can actually be done at a local level. So this is kind of, and I will touch on other quotes as well as we go through the presentation to bring their voices in as well. And this is the future promises. So prospects for children, a global outlook. So now, right, COVID has been, we recently went, I've had it over a year, right? We reached that part. And so I just wanted us to quickly watch a couple words, a couple minutes of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres talking about COVID and its impacts on education. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, you could play.
COVID-19 pandemic spreads across the globe, we are seeing an alarming pattern. The poorest and most vulnerable members of society are being hardest hit, both by the pandemic and the response. I am especially concerned about the well-being of the world's children. Thankfully, children have so far been largely spared from the most severe symptoms of the disease, but their lives are being totally upended. I appeal to families everywhere and leaders at all levels: protect our children. Today, we are launching a report that highlights the risks they face. First, education. Almost all students are now out of school. Some schools are offering distance learning, but this is not available to all. Children in countries with slow and expensive internet services are severely disadvantaged. Second, food. A staggering 310 million school children, nearly half of the world's total, rely on school for a regular source of daily nutrition. Even before COVID-19, the world faced unacceptable rates of childhood malnutrition and stunting. Third, safety. With children out of school, their communities in lockdown, and the global recession biting deeper, family stress levels are rising. Children are both victims and witnesses of domestic violence and abuse. With schools closed, an important early warning mechanism is missing. There is also a danger that girls will drop out of school, leading to an increase in teenage pregnancies. And we must not ignore the growing risks children are facing as they spend more time online. This can leave children vulnerable to online sexual exploitation and grooming. A lack of face-to-face contact with friends and partners may lead to heightened risk-taking, such as sending sexualized images, and increased and unstructured time online may expose children to potentially harmful and violent content, as well as greater risk of cyberbullying. Governments and parents all have a role in keeping children safe. Social media companies have a special responsibility to protect the vulnerable. Fourth, health. Reduced household income will force poor families to cut back on essential health and food expenditure, particularly affecting children, pregnant women, and breastfeeding mothers. Polio vaccination campaigns have been suspended. Measles immunization campaigns have stopped in at least 23 countries. And as health services become overwhelmed, sick children are less able to access care. With the global recession gathering pace, there could be hundreds of thousands additional child deaths in 2020. These are just some of the findings of the report we are issuing today.
So he does, thank you for sharing your screen, Zoe, for sharing that. He does go into a little bit more about how, again, all of these SDGs are interconnected, right? And talking about women and violence against women, and other educational disparities. However, I just wanted to point that it has affected deeply by a multitude of ways, right? Yes. Okay. So next slide, please. Oh. Awesome, thank you. So another picture, right? COVID-19, when paired, and this is another quote from an educational leader from this report by the Office of Global Insight and Policy. COVID-19, when paired with other stressors such as climate change, racism, and other barriers, are having unprecedented impacts on youth mental health. This is Larissa Crawford. We also have another one. All right, so economic superpowers decide what happens to other countries. They feed in their principles, values, and systems to other least developing countries. This is where the losers and winners from globalization come from. As a result, there is a backlash against globalization. So these are all tying into what I said before about a tipping point and where they project and see education focusing on globally, which is kind of all these culmination of events. Next slide, please. So this also, so yeah, all of these are studies within the UN. This is a figure, countries' use of remote learning modalities for pre-primary schools by region. So just to start, this studies early childhood education, because investment in early childhood education results in positive returns, not only for individual children, but also for building more efficient and effective education systems. Recent analysis estimated that every US dollar spent on pre-primary education results in $9 of benefits to society. And so it does have a big compounding impact on the rest of the education prospects. And so we see here that in Latin America and the Caribbean, the primary modality is online. And we see that in Western and Central Africa, the learning modality in COVID has been the radio. We also have seen different modalities being used, such as television and other such instances. So while broadcast and online modalities can reach more children, paper and mobile phone-based supplements can be used to reach children and families without access to technology, who are more likely to be more marginalized even before this crisis. I will read one more quote because I believe, right, I want to bring their voices into here. So the notion of empowerment through technology is an empty vessel. If you can't address the question of education and access to education politically, then technology can only do so much and will end up exacerbating the problem. So this is Matthew Safir Mahoudi, and he is with Amnesty International. So again, we're coming back to these emerging themes from this presentation, right, which is questions of access and quality that are being influenced by global politics and policies. And we have our sources here again, if you want to learn more. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is another figure. Countries' support for pre-primary teachers compared with primary teachers. So just as I have explained, right, pre-primary teachers are very important for for children to continue then to primary and then hopefully to secondary, right? But as we see here as well, they have not been, oh, right. And with primary being the little dots on top, the gray dots on top, and the pre-primary kind of support is in the blue bar graph. So for example, teachers provided with instructions on remote learning. This is great that 74% of primary teachers are provided with some kind of instructions, right? How are we going to change this way that we have been teaching children for this whole time and go to online, right? Unprecedented time. So that is on one hand, right, it's good to see that it's, in the 70s at least, but however, the pre-primary teachers have been only given 50% less help. So, and that's that is the highest percentage. So they have not been, the governments have not been prioritizing pre-primary teachers as well as they have primary teachers, which might have some consequences in the long run. Thank you. So beautiful. And so now, just kind of before we step into the US educational system, we kind of did a little background on the international UN statistics and how it is now and past and future and COVID. So I just wanted to take a second and see if anyone had any questions. Please feel free to unmute or use the chat. Okay, so then Zoe, would you mind playing this documentary? Just kind of thinking about all of the themes that we have touched on. Oh, sorry. I did get one question. So how much will on the job training and economic growth make a difference? Yes, that is a question that I'm going to pose to all of you. What are your thoughts on this? And I will repost this question in the chat so we all know. So basically asking, right, how maybe has the economy influenced and can influence positively or negatively these statistics that we have talked about.
Wait, so just to clarify the question, is it how much will job training, economic growth make a difference in, I guess, at-home learning and education? Is that what it's getting at?
I think way around.
I think, Bryson, I would love to hear your input about that.
Okay,
yeah.
Well, if that's the question, I think that, yeah, I guess economic growth and stability leads to more jobs, and also job training leads to more jobs and more, it allows, I guess, families and households to have the means to be able to afford and, I guess, make it just a lot easier for their children to be able to do online learning and stuff like that. Like, I feel like just in terms of like world statistics and stuff, like it's the developed countries and the wealthier areas that successfully incorporate online learning as an alternative to in-person learning. And yeah, it's going to be those countries or those cities that are poor and don't have the access to, I don't know, like technology and internet and stuff like that to really make online learning a good alternative. So I think that is my answer to the question.
Yeah, Bryson, you bring up some very, very interesting and needed points, right, about technology and access and the possibilities that having a stable job and income could provide a better future for your children by, X, Y, and Z, and especially it's gives you a better buffer for sure in transitioning to COVID. Thank you for your input.
And I guess also it allows, like, if both parents are working like really long hours, multiple jobs, like they don't have enough time to really, I guess, keep an eye on their children and make sure they're doing well in school. So that's also an issue too.
Right, parent surveillance and support, how much, or even is the children helping with some of these jobs, right? Is the children even in school, or are they taken out because the harvest season has come and they have to, take something out of the fields, right? So yeah, very important questions. Yeah, and anybody else have any thoughts before we move?
I just had one super quick input. I think part of the question also addressed on the job training and perhaps how it correlated to access to quality education. And something that came to mind for me when I heard that was that I was wondering if you guys think if perhaps something like the pandemic that halts access to quality education, if that would perhaps lead to increase in the job training in the future, as opposed to, say, education or training in the classroom. If anyone had any thoughts on that. Okay, since it seems like no one really had any thoughts of that, I do think that perhaps there is a correlation there, and perhaps the decrease in access to quality education, that aspect could hopefully lead to increase in the job training. But yeah, I'll let you continue, Sasha.
If I could just say, so I think we think about education in a lot of ways, but and I like the fact that you mentioned economic and you're talking about economic activity. That's important, and we certainly want people to be able to be productive in the economy. Then again, education should also be about producing good citizens, and I think we've certainly seen that to be a challenge in a lot of the world, given the access to education and also the way you design the education systems. So that's something to try to balance those two things. And I think we could probably do a lot better than what we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for your insight. I think that is exactly what we're going to touch right, I think, on in this video right now as well, in this trailer, backpack full of cash. So I think that, yeah, I think they're right. Education has so many different factors, right? I mean, economy and also being good citizens. And I think that these are all, it's a complex issue, and these are all very good things to be holding through this presentation. So thank you for your participation, and let's watch this.
The school that would be open to the rich and poor alike. That institution is endangered.
Public schools represent over $600 billion a year of government spending. Reformers say all that money can be managed more efficiently if the system is run like a business and parents shop around for the school of their choice.
This is about choice, accountability, and providing a great education to every child.
Our children have a backpack full of cash, and the school should vie for the privilege of having that backpack turned over to them.
The district's money is being shifted to charter schools. They've become aggressive and entrepreneurial.
Now it's impossible to cut anymore. This is serious.
The public simply doesn't understand that their public schools are being taken away.
They are robbing our kids. It's about privatizing, not improving public education.
What's desperately unfair is to pretend that that's public education. It's absolutely not. It's an opportunity to be on islands of privilege amidst a sea of inequity.
Schools that receive taxpayer dollars purport that men and dinosaurs gathered together. The Bible says spanking a child won't kill them, if you do it right.
In online schools, it'd be 40% savings to taxpayers.
There's no high quality research that shows that this is a good method of teaching and learning.
My daughter spent 30 days just taking standardized tests.
I've sat through those classes. I can barely sit still for 42 minutes. they're asked to do it for 12 years.
What has happened in this city is morally bankrupt. We are leaving our children out in the dark.
We're here to support all children, and you're not serving that diversity.
If you provide enough resources to a school district and you help that district use those resources wisely, you get these improbable and fantastic scholars.
I need a fully funded public education simply because I deserve it.
This is our challenge.
Speak up, act up. History will judge us by what we do now.
So thank you. I think that touches on a lot. There is a lot to unpack there, and we will not get to unpacking everything, but I just wanted to also stop and make time if anyone had any comments or reactions to what we just watched.
I have a question. Just, I don't really know too well, like what exactly, like what's the difference between a charter school and a public school? Are charter schools just schools that are, they're free like public schools, but they're run like private schools? Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that question, Bryson. No, so actually, so yes, it wasn't, this trailer did kind of run over that, but so public school funding does come from the government, right, which does make it free for us and for students all over. But charter schools is being run by, is like a business, so no, they are paid. And right, and of course, kind of we're seeing a big segregation again, right? We have had these segregated schools in the United States, and now we're also seeing a push, right? Even though it's not now called segregation, it's now called privatization, right? Because that means who can afford to pay tuition for a charter school, what kind of families, and what kind of areas have access to this choice, basically, of moving to a district that has more funded and more resources for schools.
Right. This is a good point. So I'm a product of both public and private schools, and so yes, the private schools, my parents had to pay for it. The charter schools are almost exclusively paid with public funds, and the term charter means they're chartered by whatever authority, like the school district, to take on the responsibilities for the students in an area. And then they run it as a nonprofit sometimes, or as a profit. The challenge is then you have, within the public sphere, you have different entities creating the school outputs, and that can be, as you were saying, it detracts from the overall ability of the school district to fund all of the schools, because the chartered schools will sometimes take away the what they see as the best and brightest students. So it's a school of choice from a select group within a district, and that's where it's been problematic. Although I think there's a lot of debate whether it's effective or not. Over.
I have a question about charter schools then. So it's funded by the public, and in addition, to get into a charter school, do you pay money, or?
It's funded by public funds, and the charter is, the idea is the public school system charters an organization, a company, private or private profit or nonprofit, to take on those students. So they're chartered. That is, they're given the power to do it. But there's a lot of inequities in it, and the one thing people like about it is it gets you choice, and two, it lets schools try different teaching techniques. And then some charter schools, particularly if they've cherry picked the wealthier part of a district, then they may ask for additional funds from the parents, but it is paid for by public school funds. Over.
Are they exclusive?
Well, that's part of the challenge, is that they have to draw from the students of the area they're operating in, right? So if the I'm in the Kentfield School District, so if Kentfield chartered a school, they'd have to draw from the students in that area. But they could, for example, design a school for the arts or the performing arts. So they might be able to have very selective membership that way. That's why some of the controversy is in the charter schools.
Right. And I thank you for that. And we also have another, I have another message in the chat that families are a minority and don't really have a voice. This is when we were talking about any, about our reactions to this trailer. So awesome. Next slide, please. Zoe, did you still want to do this, or would you like me to do it?
Whoops, my Wi-Fi, sorry. I'm just briefly going to talk about redlining and perhaps its correlation with educational inequality. First, I'm going to briefly share a video and then make some quick remarks if that's okay with you. So this video is basically going to outline redlining, its history, and begin to cover its correlation with education inequality. It's about 3.5 minutes long, or we'll play the first 3.5 minutes.
You know what's so sad, man? You know what's wild? Martin Luther King stood for nonviolence. Now what's Martin Luther King? A street. And I don't give a fuck where you in America. If you're on Martin Luther King Boulevard, there's some violence going down.
That, of course, is Chris Rock's famous joke about streets named for Martin Luther King Jr., which tend to be in, let's say, distressed areas. And he's not wrong, because if you look at the way housing segregation works in America, you can see how things ended up this way. Once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. Okay, let's look at MLK Boulevard in Baltimore. I want to show you how to see housing segregation in schools, in health, in family wealth, in policing. But first, an explanatory comma. It's the 1930s in the wake of the Great Depression. FDR is president. He wants to bring economic relief to millions of Americans through a collection of federal programs and projects called the New Deal. One part of that New Deal was the National Housing Act of 1934, which introduced ideas like the 30-year mortgage and low fixed interest rates. So now you have all these lower income people who can afford homes. But how do you make sure they don't default on their new mortgages? Enter the Homeowners Loan Corporation. The HOLC created residential security maps. And these maps, they're where the term redlining comes from. Green meant best area, best people, AKA businessmen. Blue meant good people, like white collar families. Yellow meant a declining area with working class families. And red meant detrimental influences, hazardous, like foreign born people, low class whites, and most significantly, Negroes. Again and again on these HOLC maps, one of the most consistent criteria for redline neighborhoods is the presence of Black and brown people. Let's be clear, studies show that people who lived in redlined areas were not necessarily more likely to default on their mortgages, but redlining made it difficult, if not impossible, to buy or refinance. So landlords abandon their properties, city services become unreliable, in most places, crime increases, and property values drop. All of these conditions fester for 30 years as white people flee to the brand new suburbs popping up all over the country. Many of those suburbs institute rules called covenants that explicitly forbid selling homes to Black people. And all of this was perfectly legal. Now it's 1968 and MLK is assassinated.
Good evening. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, 39
apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot.
Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
In the aftermath, Congress passes the Fair Housing Act of 1968. It's a policy meant to encourage equal housing opportunities regardless of race or religion or national origin, and it offers protections for future homeowners and renters, but it does little to fix the damage already done. Over the next 50 years, the Fair Housing Act is rarely enforced. So you can still see housing segregation and its effects in Baltimore and often along any MLK Boulevard in any US city, like its effects on wealth. So home ownership is the major way Americans create wealth, right? Well, discrimination in housing is the major reason that Black families up and down the income scale have a tiny fraction of the family wealth that white families do, even white families with less education and lower incomes. For almost 30 years, 98% of FHA loans were handed out to white borrowers. Not only were Black neighborhoods redlined, and not only was the Fair Housing Act selectively enforced, if at all, but it is still today much harder for a Black person to get a mortgage or home loan than it is for a white person.
Families are fearful of speaking up about a basic human right that should be afforded to everyone in the world, but definitely in the richest country in the world.
And housing segregation in schools. The primary way that Americans pay for public schools is by paying property taxes. People who live in more valuable homes have better funded local schools, better paid teachers, better school facilities, and more resources. Here's the feedback loop. The better the schools in a neighborhood, the more those homes in that neighborhood are worth. And the higher the property values of those homes, the more money there is for schools, and so on and so on. And housing segregation in health.
All right, so that was the video I wanted to show you guys. I'm gonna pivot back to the presentation. Let's move all these tabs around. All right, we're back. So we all saw that video. We all saw the history about redlining. And so you see how this thing happens in, say, the 1930s, and then it still has booming effects today. So in California, about 22% of funding for schools comes from property taxes. So you see how perhaps, they started to redline neighborhoods in the 1930s. And then property values aren't worth as much. And then at the same time, then you have lower income, your schools aren't as well funded. And then the question is, who do you think is going to go to college? Is it going to be the kid in the well-funded school in the area with the, higher property taxes or more revenue from the property taxes, probably more accurate? Or is it going to be the kid from a former redlined area? I think that this clearly illustrates how the cycle just shows and perpetuates and basically feeds back into itself. So you get this multi-generational poverty cycle that, happened, started in the 1930s, partially started in the 1930s, and then you still see the ghost of it nowadays. I think this video also sheds a little bit on light of how all the SDGs are connected. One of the ones that particularly stood out to me, together with obviously SDG number 4, was SDG number 10. So say SDG number 10 is reduce inequality within and among countries. So if we do that, then perhaps, there'd be less inequality in the areas and how much money schools get. And perhaps then there'd be less kind of like an education inequality. So I think it kind of sheds on the light on the theme that Sasha has been putting forth about how all the SDGs are interconnected. That being said, I'm going to hand it back to Sasha.
Thank you, Zoe. So just as we have, we're coming to a close of our presentation and the start of just kind of wondering what we could do about this and putting all of these different themes together, right? Right. So with that, maybe PearDirect is not working, and that is fine. And we could use the chat. You could direct message me, or you could put it for everyone, or just on mute. But let's go over this question. So high stakes testing could lead to teachers only teaching those who are likely to do well. And we have this picture and depiction. And so, yeah, what are your thoughts when reading this quote? We could take a second to think what this means. And yes, thank you for your contributions.
I'm sorry, could someone explain what high stakes testing means?
Yes, Bonnie, thank you for your question. Basically, high stakes testing, there's examples such as, SAT, right, or just testing that college students need to get accepted into college, and into tertiary education. It could also be seen in other types of testing, GRE. I mean, a lot of different modes and levels of testing. Also, a very famous one, or popular, in elementary schools as well, as standardized testing, right? that is in elementary schools and middle schools, right? And I think, I don't know if they're yearly, or no, maybe not, maybe, biannually or something, but they definitely do test math and science and language arts. I think they name it like that. And they're able to kind of classify children based on their percentages. So we have a response. We have one response to start us off in the chat. This quote lines up with systems thinkers asking, what is the purpose of any given system? In this case, to pass tests or to educate children. That's a very good question. Does anyone can take a stab at that one? Let's open it up to the floor for everyone.
Excuse me, are you receiving comments?
Yes, please, Sue. Thank you.
Sure. I don't think that they're independent of each other. We don't do this or that. Education is so involved in every aspect of our lives, and most of the education that we get is out of a formal setting. So I don't think that we do this or that. We're educating students or we're trying to make money. Yeah, there are people who put that as a priority, especially the administrators. But I do believe that when we're looking at a more holistic vision, we see education as a way to create value in the students and the way to build their confidence as a human being and to lead a contributive life so that in fact they're able to own their own selves with a greater sense of a purpose and mission and identity instead of the swaying back and forth of hormones or peer pressures or expectations. Very hard when parents don't have this type of background. Uh, but the current generation of parents often does put the students in a more priority and listens to young people. So I think that the more that we can, as supporters of education or educators ourselves, can put ourselves in the position of building esteem and a safe, trusting environment for the individual to express themselves and in all that who they are without the judgment calls, I think that we are contributing the most positively to education in a healthy way.
May I make a comment? Oh, I'm sorry.
Bonnie?
I invited my friend Ro Rigney because she's a teacher and I don't have kids or grandkids, going to grade school. I just wondered about this slide here to hear from Ro. I'm sorry, would that be okay, Ro? Only if you want, because I don't understand this. I mean, do you actually do these testings at school in your school?
Well, we have the standards-based testing, um, the testing that goes on that was typically third grade and up, but now with the COVID situation, there's sort of a new kind of testing going on, and that is K and up, because now districts, and I teach in Mill Valley, which is a more affluent area um, and well supported as a public school district. Um, but districts across the country now are having to show proof of learning. And so there are platforms that are out that districts have to engage in to display data to show. So first grade and kindergarten teachers are having to submit students to these tests, which is really unfortunate because they're really hard. And at this point, they're all online. And I don't know what to say about it, but good teaching is good teachers who care, that have strong goals, and who care about individual students. The testing is not very accurate in always showing what's going on. One of the problems that we've had recently with this new kind of testing that we have to submit to the state county is that because it's all online and it's at home, it's particularly inaccurate, especially with the younger children that are not independent on a device. So, yeah.
Thank you for both of your contributions. So you did bring up an amazing point, and as well you, Ro, about creating inclusive and supportive environments for all students to feel safe and welcomed and nurtured and supported in their education, right? Maybe not only the ones as we see here that are well dressed and well fed, right? But also those that do seem to be struggling. And I think that, Ro, you did make a good point, right, as well, that teachers do have a big impact, right? And education can make a big impact, right? I mean, individually as well. For example, having culturally relevant teaching. And really what that means is, okay, if you see that the majority of your class is from Mexico, right? Okay, well, I'm going to now look into Mexican culture, right? I'm going to maybe give some examples, right, of their culture, right? So students feel more engaged, right? Because it's very interesting that now standardized testing starts when at a kindergarten, right? What intelligence, right, can you really measure at that age? And really, it goes down to the initial IQ tests. And when we look at those that are giving to students, this starts the process of tracking, which is basically the students that do well do go to advanced classes, right? They could go to AP classes in high school, or they get to do more the excelled version, right? And the students that do not kind of lag behind and are going in that. And just for history, right, the IQ tests actually are all on culture. They have questions. For example, chess and tennis are some questions. Just what is this? Right. I mean, it's for kindergartners, right? But what I'm trying to get at is that is definitely getting at the dominant culture in the United States, right? Which is this white European culture that is infiltrated, right? And so that is not inclusive of children who do originate from different countries and cultures. So I think going back to your questions, it's so important for us to just be cognizant of that and to try to reverse that. I want to also acknowledge all of the responses in my chat. So so cognitive traits favor kids going to college and neglects less able kids. That's one. Another one is Felicia has it right. This type of testing is performance outcomes rather than student outcomes. Very true. The picture is pretty telling. Pushing food/education into the kid who has been fattened up already. Pretty awful example in my book with the skinny, starving kid looking on sadly. Right. Oh, thank you for that comment. We do see that that child looking wantingly, right, as also wanting to have equal access to and equal acknowledgement of and respect, right? And also wants that same care and attention that the student has. Another one is access is the systemic issue here, regardless of how the question is posed. Right. We start, just with the system of schools being funded by property taxes, and we have learned how that originated, right, and how that is very racialized. That does have very lasting impacts, even in Marin County, as we will hear about in a second from Felicia. Groups, another one is groups are working on measuring education. Very interesting concepts. Thank you, Ro. we have a comment, right? Mexico schools operate totally differently, right? So how can a teacher here utilize some of that knowledge, right, to help bolster and make students feel more at home here, right? How about we also teach and make school engaging and relevant for them, right? Based on their intelligence, right? Right, we have another, very true. Every school system throughout the world has their own systems, very different from USA. We have Mexico involves parenting more than California in schooling, right? So it is of more familial ties, right? That can be touched upon when when teachers teach, right? And when we have a value creating education. So thank you all for your inputs. I think we really started to think more deeply about some of these issues in the system thinking, right? This question that we had at the beginning. I just want to come back to that, right? What is the purpose of any given system? And this test to pass tests, right? So what is the purpose to educate children? Holding that. Thank you, Zoe. You could go to the next slide. So now I'm going to bring it to Felicia, who's going to talk about, yes, I'm just going to give you the floor, Felicia. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So if you could just unshare your screen, Zoe, and I'll bring up a couple of bits here. So first, just to look at the California level briefly. So just for some context, Sasha and Zoe asked me to share a little bit about the local level. So just to zoom down to California from the national picture, this is on, I'll put the link in the chat also, governing.com. And if I can find the chat, I will paste this link in here in case anybody's interested to check this out. I have not vetted this source. It's something I came up with pretty quickly. So I would have to look into it deeper if I were to cite it for some official reason, but let's just go with it for the moment. Education spending per student by state. So I've sorted it by clicking on total per pupil spending, and you can click on these different headers to organize them differently. And so I was kind of scrolling down to look. New York is at the top here at $22,366 spending per pupil. And we're looking for California. So here's the United States average, $11,762. California is a little bit below that at $11,495 per pupil. Also at the California level, this is the California County Scorecard of Children's Wellbeing. So this covers more than just education. If you click the, oh, let me also put this one in the chat for anyone who's interested to cite any of this or look into it deeper. You can choose an indicator, and here we'll click on education, and this is for the state as a whole. So for example, children in working families for whom a licensed childcare space was available, 25%. Students who were college or career ready, 44%. And again, this is at the state level. Students who were ready or conditionally ready for college level math courses, 32%. Students who reported feeling connected to their school, 55%. And then you can click on a county. So we'll click on Marin County, and we can look at some of those same things, like the one we just looked at. Students who reported feeling connected to their school, 64%. And so you can look into that more deeply if you'd like. I think down here somewhere it tells you the details about where they get this data. So then I want to make sure that everybody is familiar with the, so this is an article actually from 2019, September 2019, and it's from latimes.com. I will pop into the chat for you. And this is right here in Marin County. A tiny Marin County district got California's first school desegregation order in 50 years. So you'll have to read that article if you're interested in this, but this is the Sausalito Marin City School District, where the state came in and ruled that indeed the two schools, one being Willow Creek Academy, a charter school in Sausalito, and the other being Bayside MLK in Marin City, that they had been illegally segregated by the district. And so that's been a really in-depth process that's been undertaken by the school district. And this is the link to the district page. If you're interested to look at some of their videos of hearings and meetings that they've done, you can go and look into that, and including this video of a 2020 desegregation town hall early in 2020 when people could still get together in rooms. And then finally, I wanted to make sure people know about Marin Promise Partnership. And I'll put this link in the chat as well. They're a local organization that works to help close the disparity gaps in educational achievement in Marin County. And they have some scorecards here if you wanted to look at those more in depth. So I think that is what I was supposed to cover. Was there anything I forgot, Zoe or Sasha?
No, that was awesome. Yeah. Any questions before we move on? Awesome. Well then, I think now we have come to a discussion. So next page, Zoe, please. Right, is what can UNA Marin do about this? Kind of keeping in mind all that we have learned today. And so we have some starting ideas. Zoe, would you like to explain this?
Yeah, for sure. So a few starting ideas of what you can do in order to help to achieve education access equality. So one of the things you could do is volunteer as a tutor. So the Canal Alliance is a nonprofit aimed at eliminating immigrants' barriers to success. They do this through a plethora of ways. They have legal clinics, food banks, ESL classes, but one of the things that they do is that they have after-school tutoring for middle school and high school students. Personally, I volunteered at the Canal Alliance for a bit over a year as a high school tutor. It's very fun, and it's a way that you can really kind of like make a difference to one person. So I would strongly recommend it. And they are still operating during COVID online. Just go on their website and go on the volunteer tab, and you can easily volunteer through them. So that's something you could do personally to help one person. So another thing you could also do is launch or support efforts to collect unused computers, iPads, or smartphones to refurbish them and give them to schools. So increasingly schools have been more and more dependent on technology, and I think that this trend has only been accelerated by the pandemic. So one of the nonprofits collecting technology to donate to schools is RRR Computer. They are specific to the Bay Area. So if you have a laptop lying around that perhaps is really old and you don't precisely use, or an iPad, instead of recycling it, perhaps donating it to RRR Computer might be a better alternative. And even if you don't, maybe you know someone who does, and this can make a really big difference in a kid's ability to just access their classes. So very strongly recommended. Or otherwise, a more straightforward method is you could donate to organizations helping achieve education equality. So as Felicia mentioned, the Marin Promise Partnership is one, the Canal Alliance is another one, and I'm sure that there are plenty more. And right now I'm just wondering for some audience feedback if anyone knows of any nonprofits helping achieve education equality in Marin County. You can just unmute yourself or sending in the chat. Personally, I can't see this chat, so Sasha, I would rely on you to read that out loud. So yeah, opening the stage now.
I can talk about one, and that is 10,000 Degrees, which tutors students in Marin, and a friend of mine tutors for them, and this is what she wrote. I have been tutoring a fourth grader on Zoom since January as a school volunteer with 10,000 Degrees and Willow Creek Elementary School, Sausalito. 10,000 Degrees has a school volunteer tutor program in some elementary and middle schools in Marin. School has been disrupted for so many children and their families because of COVID that I'm glad I can help one student for now stay on track and do some of his schoolwork. The volunteer tutors are working in many different schools, all on Zoom, which has been a learning experience for tutors and teachers. The school volunteer coordinators at 10,000 Degrees do such a great job of helping the tutors and setting up the assignments in classrooms. And then they have a college success program that's now on Zoom since last March, with workshops, financial aid, scholarships, and leadership training online. They've expanded into San Francisco, Palo Alto, Napa, and Sonoma, as well as Marin. It's an incredible resource for middle and high school students in underserved communities. 80% of their students graduate from a 4-year college, and that is above the national average. And then some of the volunteers are mentoring students from Dominican as part of a service learning class, because the freshmen are at home or on campus, but doing classes online. Normally, they would be working as a volunteer in the community, but this semester and last semester, they are meeting as a class online, and then several tutors talk to them in breakout rooms and about topics of cultural studies and cultural humility training. Cynthia Taylor is the professor, and Judy Kramer and a coordinator with 10,000 Degrees have put this program together. The readings and modules are very interesting, and discussions also. This is from Iris Seligman. She was unable to attend today, but asked me to represent her.
Thank you so much, Joan, for representing her and for reading that. I do want to give time for Vida, if you would like to talk a little bit more about Latino Marin.
Are you talking to me?
No, I was talking to Vida. So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'm Vida Flores, and I'm the founder of Latino Marin. It's a local organization that strives to overcome the digital divide and weave the Latino experience into Marin County. And I just put something in the chat that our local jurisdictions have done a great job providing free internet for our students. And one of an opportunity for us is to continue to advocate at local jurisdiction levels, at the city and county level, to continue these partnerships with Xfinity and other corporations that have provided funding for free internet. Because the free internet not only is great for our students, but it's also benefits our seniors who can't afford internet, and other minority groups who are also caught in this whirlwind of not having enough money to afford internet. And a standard internet connection can be anywhere from $30 to $80. So it's good for everyone to advocate for free internet. And Latino Marin has been around since 2017, really educating the community on voting rights and education for the next generation of our students.
Thank you very much for that. We have this all linked in the chat. There are plenty of plentitude of ways to take action today, tomorrow, and every day onward. So thank you. And I am going to read one more comment in the chat. The Creative Educators International Network is having a public Zoom and will be discussing the same SDG 4 on education in the breakout room on Saturday, March 27th. Perfect. So if we want to, there is email for more information. Awesome. Any last thoughts on this discussion and what we as in Marin residents of Marin can do about this?
Yeah, I have one last thought. I'm really sorry I can't see the chat, but I think that, if anything, if you don't have the time to volunteer, or you don't have an device to donate, or you don't have money to donate, I think that one thing you could always do is educate yourself. Be aware that these inequalities exist, and if you can't talk about these inequalities to those around you, the first step to solving the issue is being aware that it's there. So just educating yourself, being aware that it's there, and educating those around you is already a huge leap in the right direction, and it's pretty easy.
Thank you, Zoe. Oh, someone else?
Where did you say you donate devices to?
Yeah, so the nonprofit that we found was RRR Computer. They operate in the Bay Area. However, I'm sure there's a few others that you could possibly donate to as well.
How about iPhones?
Those will work as well. Yes, thank you. And any smartphones. You could also access Zoom and another such infrastructure on there as well. Thank you, Felicia, for providing the website. If you just check the chat, I think you will be able to find your way to that. Yes, and so thank you again, Zoe, for bringing us and for centering us in one of the major themes and goals that we had in creating this discussion, right? Was to educate, and we really do have a lot of power in sharing this truth, right, to everyone, right? So I also want to just read a couple of comments. The city of Santa Rosa has free internet, and we can have free internet in Marin as well. Thank you. San Francisco also has free Wi-Fi. Yes, let's get this in Marin. This is something that we can lobby for as well. And Latino Marin will also take your gently used computers or tablets. So to answer your question, RR Computer or Latino Marin too, you have options. So thank you all very much. And let's go on to 25. Thank you. I think so as we're running out of time, we can skip the slide, right? Just to foster. And this is just closing, right? There are uplifting global initiatives. If you just click the first link, Zoe. And then you go to the bottom a little bit, you scroll, even more, and then you will see, right here, okay. So you have Azerbaijan leads for women in STEM. So UNDP has joined forces with USAID to inspire the next generation of women and girls. Young Libyan entrepreneurs help children learn online. E-learning gets a boost from a UNDP-trained tech startup. And education will help us build a future. Teachers and students at 2 Mosul schools enjoy being back in the classroom. Thank you for that, Zoe. That is all. If you're interested in more research, we have a couple slides or a couple of links. Next slide, please, Zoe. Awesome. So we have some slides as well that you could learn more about, as well as any other source. All information has sources, so you could go learn more from there. And next slide. Yep, these are just some of the side sources, and one more. Perfect. So thank you for all your participation. Yes, sorry, someone's going to say something.
Oh, that was just me, Sasha, Felicia. Great. So if you have a moment to unmute yourself and give a round of applause to our speakers, Sasha, and co-support Zoe. Great. Thank you both so much for that presentation. So again, we are the United Nations Association Marin County chapter. We put on these events for free to our local community and friends and neighbors. For the most part, this is a volunteer effort. There's just small amounts of costs involved. If you're interested in joining or renewing your United Nations Association membership, your membership fee helps cover those relatively small costs that we have in putting on these events. And I just put a link in the chat to a page where you can join or renew. If you're 25 or younger, it's free. Other than that, it's $50 a year at the basic level, $25 for the first year. Also, I'm going to put a link in here to our SDG series. That was this number 4 is 1 in the series. So you'll be able to go to that website and see links to previous events and information about our upcoming SDG number 5, gender equality, which is tentatively scheduled for Saturday, May 8th, 3 to 4:30. And Bonnie is our membership chair. So Bonnie, I was going to ask if you have like 5 minutes to stay after in case anyone has questions about membership.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bonnie. And anybody have any last minute questions or anything to share? Feel free to share it in the chat or unmute yourself and share out loud.
I just learned something on the chats because there's always so much good information there that gets lost for me once the Zoom is over. There's at the very bottom where you would put your message, where you would type your message here. Just above that, at the very corner is a square with 3 dots in it. And if you go to that 3 dots and click it, you can save the chat and it will go right into your own little email box. So
thank you for that hot tip, Sue. That's helpful.
I'm not tech savvy, but I'm learning as I go.
Good point. Okay. All right, we'll switch to the gallery view here so we can all wave at each other. And like I said, please stay on and ask Bonnie if you have any membership related questions. And other than that, we hope to see you next time, and be sure you're on our email list. You can check with Bonnie about that as well for announcements about upcoming events and related resources.
Okay.
Thanks much. Well done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Felicia.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Sasha.
Is Edward Dennebaum there, Ed?
Yes, I am.
Just wanted to ask you, well, I just want to ask everybody that's still on the line about membership.
I will pay mine right away.
Yeah, well, that's nice.
Thanks, Ed.